The word respiration is used in two different ways. Cellular respiration, which takes place in the mitochondria, is the release of energy from the breakdown of food molecules in the presence of oxygen. Without oxygen, cells lose their ability to produce ATP. The blood carries oxygen from the lungs to the body's tissues and carries carbon dioxide, a waste product of cellular respiration, in the opposite direction. At the level of the organism, respiration means the process of gas exchange, the release of carbon dioxide, and the uptake of oxygen between the lungs and the environment. The basic function performed by the human respiratory system is to bring the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood, the air, and tissues. The respiratory system consists of the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and air moves through the nose to a tube at the back of the mouth called the pharynx or throat. The pharynx serves as a passageway for both air and food. Air moves from the pharynx into the trachea or windpipe. A flap of tissue called the epiglottis covers the entrance to the trachea when you swallow. To keep the lung tissue healthy, air entering the respiratory system must be warmed, moistened, and filtered. Large dust particles get trapped by the hairs lining the entrance to the nasal cavity. Some of these cells produce a thin layer of mucus. The mucus moistens the air and traps inhaled particles of dust or smoke. Cilia sweep the trapped particles and mucus away from the lungs toward the pharynx. The mucus and trapped particles are either swallowed or spit out. At the top of the trachea is the larynx. The larynx contains two highly elastic folds of tissue known as the vocal cords. Your ability to speak, shout, and sing comes from these tissues. From the larynx, air passes through the trachea into two large passageways in the chest cavity called bronchi. Each bronchus leads into one of the lungs. Within each lung, the large bronchus subdivides into smaller bronchi, which lead to even smaller passageways called bronchioles. The bronchioles continue to subdivide until they reach a series of dead ends, millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. The process of gas exchange in the lungs is very efficient. The air that you inhale usually contains 21% oxygen and 0.04% carbon dioxide. Exhale air usually contains less than 15% oxygen and 4% carbon dioxide. Breathing is the movement of air into and out of the lungs. There are no muscles connected to the lungs. The force that drives air into the lungs comes from ordinary air pressure. The lungs are sealed in two sacs, called the pleural membranes, inside the chest cavity. At the bottom of the cavity is a large flat muscle known as the diaphragm. When you breathe in or inhale, the diaphragm contracts and the rib cage rises up. Atmospheric pressure does the rest, filling the lungs as air rushes into the breathing passageways. Exhaling is a passive event. When the rib cage lowers and the diaphragm muscle relaxes, the pressure in the chest cavity becomes greater than atmospheric pressure. Breathing is such an important function that your nervous system will not let you have complete control over it. The part of the brain that controls breathing is the medulla oblongata. Cells in its breathing center monitor the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. The upper part of the respiratory system is generally able to filter out dust and foreign particles that could damage the lungs. People engage in an activity, smoking tobacco, that damages and eventually destroys this protective system. Three of the most dangerous substances containing tobacco are nicotine, carbon monoxide, and tar. Nicotine is a stimulant drug that increases the heart rate and blood pressure. Carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas that blocks the transport of oxygen by hemoglobin in the blood. Tar contains a number of compounds that have been shown to cause cancer. Only 30% of male smokers live to age 80, but 55% of male non-smokers live to that age. Clearly, smoking reduces life expectancy. Smoking can cause such respiratory diseases as chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and lung cancer.
The circulatory system. Its main function is to transport oxygen, nutrients, and other substances throughout the body and removes waste from tissues. How does the heart pump blood through the body? Much of the time, you're probably not even aware of your heart at work, but when you exercise, you can feel your heart beating near the center of your chest. The heart is composed almost entirely of muscle. The muscle begins contracting before you are born and stops only when you die. In the walls of the heart, two thin layers of epithelial and connective tissue form a sandwich around a muscle layer called the myocardium. Powerful contractions of the myocardium pump blood through the circulatory system. The heart is divided into four chambers. A wall called the septum separates the right side of the heart from the left side. The septum prevents oxygen-poor and oxygen-rich blood from mixing. On each side of the septum are an upper and lower chamber. Each upper chamber, or atrium, receives blood from the body. Each lower chamber, or ventricle, pumps blood out of the heart. Blood from the body enters the heart through the right atrium. Blood from the lungs through the left atrium. When the atria contract, blood flows into the ventricles, flaps, and connective tissues called bowels are located between the atria and the ventricles. When blood moves from the atria through the ventricles, those bowels open. When the ventricles contract, the bowels close, preventing blood from flowing back into the atria. Bowels are also located at the exit of each ventricle. This system of bowels keeps blood moving through the heart in one direction, like a traffic on a one-way street. As blood flows through the circulatory system, it moves through three types of blood vessels: arteries, capillaries, and veins. Arteries are large vessels that carry blood from the heart to the tissue of the body. The capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, and after blood passes through the capillaries, it returns to the heart through veins. It is important to have your blood pressure measured because blood pressure that is too high or too low can have serious effects on most body systems.